So Josh is a graduate of Georgia Southern with a BA in English and a minor in writing and resides in Smyrna, Georgia, outside of Atlanta. He's been married to his wife for 9 years, and they have two future Eagles aged 5 and 2. He currently is a business process design leader at Allstate Insurance, where he analyzes problems and employs creative solutions for decision making. He is an investor and serves on the financial review board of Round Trip Brewing Company in Atlanta. And Josh was recently honored as a 40 under 40 alumni of Georgia Southern and is currently an MBA candidate enrolled in the Parker College of Business, going for that double eagle. Thank you very much for being with us this evening, Josh, and you can take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Conkle. I appreciate it. Hi, everybody. As Dr. Conkle said, I am an alumni of Georgia Southern, and honestly, with an English degree, I never thought I'd be in the career path that I am right now and doing the kind of work that I'm doing. A little bit about me and kind of what my story is and how I got where I am. I've moved to Georgia from Florida right at high school. Moved to a town called Cartersville, north of Atlanta. And at that time, didn't have a whole lot of direction, but I was actually pretty good at writing. So my English teacher kind of noticed that I had a skill set to write very efficiently, and probably at above a level that was with my class. So it was just something that started interesting me was writing. I was always able to do my essays pretty quickly. Always get a B or an A on it, just kind of crank them out like that. So I got signed up for some literary competitions while I was there. Went and did those. Had some success at the regional level, and then they had never had anybody win at region, so the school didn't even know that there was a state competition. So I never went to those because they were just completely unaware that it existed. Came to Georgia Southern in 2004. While I was there, I worked a bunch of different jobs. One of the coolest ones I had was actually getting to paint the football field. So I was on the field crew for the football team with the baseball team. Ended up working for Progressive Insurance in a local office they had in Statesboro, and kind of got into insurance at that point. So I had thought of English as a major even before then, had an interest in law or teaching. So I wasn't sure which path I wanted to go into, but maybe after law, teach something like that. When I was in school and getting ready to graduate, the recession had hit. So jobs were very scarce. It wasn't a good market. Law school was very expensive, and the job I was in with Progressive, I kind of worked in claims and I knew a bunch of attorneys. And so I would just ask them and say, how are things for law school? And they said, don't do it. You're going to end up with a lot of debt, and you're going to make, very little money compared to the student loans you're going to have right now, because their lawyers were kind of becoming a dime a dozen because a lot of people were just going to law school and flooding the market. So I was already in insurance. I stayed in insurance. Took a job with Allstate in 2010, started in their subrogation and arbitration department. And I really didn't even understand what those two things were. Arbitration is it's a legal procedure where they dispute or resolve disputes between carriers. So in this situation, if there was a car accident and Geico insured one person and Allstate insured the other, and there was a disagreement as to who was at fault, both cases would present their evidence. And then what my job would be to write those contentions. So I would take that evidence and I'd have to tell a story. Here is what happened. Here is why my person is not at fault and your person is at fault. And then that would go to a third party to review. In that department, my English degree became very much in handy. I was able to start drafting templates and contentions. We had a lot of common scenarios. So a lot of the car accidents were the exact same thing. Someone turned left, someone rear-ended somebody, someone ran into a house. I mean, you'd see all kinds of crazy things happen in there, stuff in parking lots. So I kind of started getting a rhythm with that. And I had a pretty big impact early on because I just said, all right, here's templates. Let's take this Word document and let's have these areas where you can fill in the spaces. And the rest of this is going to be the same language. So you'd start using that writing skill and that knowledge of the language to help make business processes more efficient. So, I mean, there are plenty of people that go to school for business, and I'm in school for business right now in grad school, but they may not think of the best way to write or build a template or effectively communicate different scenarios and different perspectives. So I got a little bored of being in the office after being with the arbitration department for a couple of years. Decided to join the catastrophe team at Allstate for a life of glamour, traveling all over the country and helping people with their insurance claims. I did that for several years. Something that came in handy there as well was, again, documentation, drafting formal correspondence. So, big companies like Allstate and then any other corporation you go to, they're going to have their own forms. They're going to have attorneys that draft language and everything for them, but it's going to be important to kind of understand how that works and then how to format and change things with policy. So more language and communication skills there too. More English, more writing. You never get away from it. Um, Reading and interpreting complex language. So, I mean, insurance policies are contracts of adhesion. They are legal documents and they're formatted. They have dependencies on different sections and they have a lot of language that people may not be used to if they haven't had the background in English and have a good understanding of the vocabulary and the words that get used there. So had to do a lot of problem solving, critical thinking. We're dealing with catastrophes, so a lot of as we would call just fire drills would occur. So being able to kind of think on your feet and be creative and kind of go with the flow on that. I did well in all of this, so I was able to move up into a variety of consulting roles and then leadership roles within the catastrophe team. So I was a manager of adjusters. I was a catastrophe field response manager, vendor oversight manager, overseeing third-party workers. I'd have 400 people up underneath me at any given time if we were responding to a hurricane. I ended up working with our attorneys during Hurricanes Harvey and Irma and developed a frontline business process to pay our customers before we had paperwork and helped draft all the correspondence and copy for all of that. So I had a really interesting and very interesting and rewarding career with the CAT team. Moved into a business process design role. So I'm a business process design manager. And that's a kind of a fancy way of saying like an internal product manager, I guess would be the more non-industry term for it. So we build and design the processes that our claims department uses to handle claims. I work with offices in Ireland and India. We have a lot of IT support and behind the scenes kind of work that happens there. So again, the role that I'm in, we look at something that is a problem or look at something that maybe we've been doing for a long time and maybe isn't a problem but could be improved upon. So look at it and see if there's a weakness or an improvement to be made. So in this role, I have to be creative, have to have strong critical thinking skills and problem solving skills, need to be able to research efficiently. Sometimes when you're dealing with multiple states or even international law, you got to be able to find information, find data and verify it and make sure you're kind of finding the right things. Very strong written communication skills. One thing I learned my first few conference calls with people in Northern Ireland and people in India is there's a famous saying about the UK and the United States is that it's two countries separated by a common language. And that is very much true with Northern Ireland and with India as well. So you could type a sentence a way that you would type it. I could email Dr. Conkle a sentence and she would understand it the way that we understand it in America. If I send that same sentence to somebody in India who speaks English or Northern Ireland who speaks English, they understand it in two different ways. So being able to kind of adapt your language to that too. So the linguistic part of it comes in handy. Like, okay, so things are very literal. They don't understand all of these different adjectives that we have or different phrases or idioms that we use. So kind of being cognizant of that. And I was teaching my peers like, hey, English is like the fourth language a lot of these people we're talking to speak. So we need to really make it very formal and speak in certain, don't just throw words and shorthand out there and slang and expect them to understand it. They don't. They learned out of a textbook and they took that textbook as gospel basically on how to speak English. And we've had a lot more practice with than they have. I've been able to use a background in English and writing to just do very well in business. It wasn't where I had planned on going, but it was what was available during a tough job market. And the skills, the soft skills, and the research and writing and communication skills have been very valuable. You'll find out as you go out into your careers in the future that it's not a given that people can communicate effectively written. It's not a given that everybody can comprehend complicated technical manuals or legal jargon. So they are skills that are necessary. It's not skill. You'll see in every job description excellent written, verbal, and communication skills. They overuse it, so it seems to lose its value. But once you actually get into those working environments, you realize, oh man, I really wish I could communicate more effectively writing. Or Steve over here, every time he sends an email, it just looks perfect and sounds great, and he gets right to the point, and or anything like that. So the English background really helped with that. Because I had the soft skills, I could learn the technical skills. And then I can kind of hone in on that with my graduate degree. I chose to go with an MBA because I'm in business. And that, having an English degree didn't prevent that either. You don't have to have a BBA or a degree in marketing or a degree in economics or anything like that to go into a different field for grad school or for your further career. So very happy with the background and kind of the springboard that English gave me. And then I'm also excited to be kind of honing my skills and getting some more formal education around the field that I've been in for the past, I guess going on 17 years now. So that's it. That's for me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that journey. I think it really shows our students, one thing, all of the different skills that they are building, as you said, in writing and communication skills and analyzing and interpreting texts and really thinking of ways to make things better. So you still get to engage in that creativity. And that's really fascinating, like behind the scenes of what's actually happening at the insurance agencies. So what we'll do next is we have some students from my English 2101 class, which is a Pathways Through the Major class, that have some questions prepared for you. And once we finish answering those questions, we'll open it up to the rest of the attendees to ask you any remaining questions, if that's okay.
That sounds great.
All right. Okay, I think you have the first question.
I do. So there's a lot of media out right now talking about the death of humanities and the need for higher education to focus on job preparation. How would you respond to that? Do you think that the broad degree of a humanities degree served you well, or do you think you would have been better off with a more narrow preparation for a specific field?
That's a good question. So do I think I should have chosen a different degree in my undergrad versus sticking with, English or humanities degree? There is a question I ask when I hire people on interviews, and it's never in our interview guides or anything, but it's just something I like to know to kind of gauge people. And something I always ask is, not everybody, nobody, I think there's a risk management program at like Florida State or something, but nobody goes to college to go into insurance claims. Like, it's not something you're like, I'm going to be an adjuster, I'm going to be a claims manager, I'm going to work, quality assurance. So, nobody does that. It's a job you kind of end up in sometimes. Not a bad job or bad career at all, but it's not something you think of. The question I ask is, if you were not in this role, what career would you have chosen for yourself? If you go back in time. And for me, just knowing more about myself as I've gotten older. So like, I answer that question, I say like, oh, I'd have been an engineer. That's kind of the, but I didn't know that when I was in college. I didn't know that back then, that maybe that's something I would have wanted to do. Going through English and reading and having these different experiences has taught me those things. And working in property damage and insurance, I've actually worked with a lot of engineers for different assessments of houses and things. And it is very difficult unless you know exactly, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a programmer, I'm going to be a physician, I'm going to be something in a technical skill. It's hard to say that that's the right path for any particular person. I do think that the broad degree does help you have more options moving forward, because once you pick that very specific degree, you end up in a very narrow job field. So if I had done engineer, I likely would be engineering or engineering adjacent forever, no matter what, unless I went back to school and did something else. With an English degree, I could still have a whole variety of different things I can do. I learned a lot of the soft skills. So you've met plenty of doctors and plenty of engineers and anything else that they can't talk to people. They can't write or communicate effectively. They can be the most brilliant person you've met in your life, but they can't convey their ideas to you in a way that makes any sense. So being able to do that and having that kind of foundation is very important. And so I don't regret getting it. And I understand why the death of humanities thing. I've read a few of those articles myself about, everything STEM, everything STEM. But you still have to be able to think, and you've got to be able to think critically, and you've got to be able to challenge things. And I think the humanities degrees train people to do that a lot better than a lot of this more technical degrees do.
Thank you. Cadiel, you have the next question. There he is. Not sure we can hear you. Now you're muted. Why don't we skip that question? Maybe you sign out and sign back in. And we'll go to Sienna's question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I noticed that you were recently named in the 40. Sorry, my cat is eating beside me, so if anyone hears chewing, I apologize.
I promise it won't be louder than my kids if they just come beating on the door screaming at me. So
Okay, fair. So I noticed you were named recently in the 40 under 40 because of the impact your leadership has had on teams. What qualities do you think makes a good leader, and what qualities yourself do you think you have shown that had made an impact on your team?
sorry, I like to just kind of paraphrase these. So just to reword, so qualities that make a good leader and what qualities do I kind of exhibit. So I just actually, so in my MBA program, I say I'm a student right now too, just like all of you. Just went through organizational behavior, or about to finish it next week as our final. One of the questions asked is exactly that. What makes you a good leader? What's the next step on your leadership profiles? And the things that I go with is transparency. So unless somebody says something to you, it's like, this is confidential, you cannot share it, it's proprietary, it's work product, it's whatever. Being transparent with anything and everything you can with your employees. So I think transparency is key. Transparency also includes communicating things effectively. You may not voice things in a way, or you don't want to add your opinion, so you want to make sure you stay objective in communications, but you still want to have those communications. The other two things which are the most important, authenticity and accountability. So those would be my top three qualities for a leader. Stepping down from that, or actually equal to start with, would be empathy, and then from there, just having a good personality, understanding your employees, being curious about what's going on with them to really build that. All of these things, you can't lead a team or build a good team without trust, and you're not going to get trust if people don't trust you. So being authentic, owning your mistakes and moving forward from them, holding other people accountable for their mistakes, and then being transparent in what you're doing and where you're doing. I like to think that for my sake, that one of the reasons I have done well as a leader, and I've had teams that kind of follow with me. A job change I made recently, I had 5 of my employees, swap lines of business because they wanted to stick with me as their boss versus, stay with what they knew and were comfortable with. And the things that I do is really just being transparent about everything I can, when I can, communicating those topics effectively, finding ways to deliver messages. Maybe I can't say something, or I can't say an entire thing for a process that's rolling out, but I can kind of give a clue, or I can kind of prepare in different ways. And then being myself around everybody, and then again, holding myself and them accountable. So those would be the biggest things for me.
Great. Those are great qualities for people to keep in mind. Cadiel, let's give it a go.
Yeah, so my question was, so like, what advice would you give to someone who's looking to really maximize their time spent in college through the English major? Like, what are some things that they can do to really get the most out of the major?
Out of the English major specifically, or just any major in general?
The English major specifically.
English major specifically. Okay. Go to class. Listen to your instructors. Especially if you do pursue some of the higher. If you do go with English and you start getting into those 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 level courses, there are a variety of topics that are very interesting, and your professors are very knowledgeable on those topics that they teach. So my favorite class, there were 2 classes I took that I thoroughly enjoyed. One was a writing course called Magical Realism. Didn't realize it was even a category that I really understood or knew, but it ended up being one of my favorite types of things to read and kind of just play around and write with. And then the other one was it was a Dr. Sear. I don't think he's still there. It was a war literature class. So reading with the having a critical reading discussion and philosophical understanding of a lot of the All Quiet on the Western Front or with the Old Breed or things they carried. So that, and the biggest part of that is you can read the book, but having that discussion is what really gives you the most out of it for me in English, is getting in a room of your peers that have read it, and with a professor that reads and understands and maybe even written, theses or critical papers on it, to truly flesh out a lot of different perspectives and have a really good conversation around it. Because I mean, you can write your essay, and that's for you, and you can read the book, and then that's your interpretation of the book, but kind of figuring out what other people got from it. I'd say that's the best way to get the most out of English.
Great. That was music to a professor's ears. Go to class. Do you have advice for making the most out of college in general that is maybe different from that, or still go to class?
Yeah, still go to class. Go to work on time. Go to work at all. I've had, but yeah, just thinking and engaging with people. I mean, and always read. So I mean, you're going to have things in life that will be, and when I say always read, be a lifelong learner, or even entertain yourself with that. So you're out of school, that doesn't mean your education stops. If you still like certain books in certain classes, or if you're moving into an industry, I mean, there's plenty of books to read on those industries too. I read more John Maxwell books after college than I probably did books in college in English degrees, just trying to up my business acumen. But being able to know how to read and interpret it helped with that a lot. Set a goal for a book a month. That can be that's honestly very easy to attain. That's kind of where I'm at right now with everything else going on. But just keep reading, keep learning, find other things that interest you, and learn to do those things as well.
Great, thank you. I think Shelby has a question.
I do. Okay. I'm sorry if you can hear my family because they're loud. But so when you're in charge of the hiring process, what is it that you're looking for exactly? Like what skills and what experience do you think would be beneficial in your job field, but also just like in general?
Okay, so when I'm hiring, what am I looking for in a candidate for like general skills for everybody? A lot of things I've outlined already. Again, communication skills. When I read a resume, I like to look how it's formatted, what words are used, are there typos? I mean, I know it sounds cliche, but I do look to, you're presenting yourself. I don't know you at all. So all you have ever given me is this piece of paper and maybe a cover letter. And so all I can go off of that is, I can tell a couple things immediately. Can you communicate effectively written, or have good written communication skills? I can tell that in your cover letter and the way that you present yourself in your resume. Do you take yourself seriously enough to make sure that there are no grammatical errors, to make sure that there are no typos, to make sure that you're using the correct words for the context that you're trying to portray? So I do look for that as well. I can't stress enough how much you could take for granted the number of people that can't see a big picture, or can't, they just don't have the type of, I mean, there's multiple types of intelligence. They just don't have the strategic or analytical mindset. So you can be strategic and analytical, you can be creative and open, you can be a combination of the two. But I look for people who are creative, and you can tell that in how they put things together. I look for people who are going to be authentic and accountable to themselves. So the same things I look for myself, I like to look for that in employees. I look for people with good communication skills. I look for people with good attitudes, or at least the ability to portray a good attitude. That's really those soft skills are invaluable. So you can't teach a lot of the things that managers look for. You get very specific. In very niche fields, you will find managers in industries that may put up with not having those soft skills. But in general practices, you're going to need those. You're going to be able to have to communicate and get along with people. So.
Great. And those are things that you can build on by going to class and communicating with people. I think we have one more question pre-prepared from Kay, and then we'll open it up to the audience. Okay, you want to ask the last question?
Yes. So you also invest in a small business and serve on the financial review board. What about your major in English has prepared you for that work? Would you recommend that students find things to participate in outside of their careers when they graduate? Why or why not?
All right, so yep, I know it sounds very strange that I work on a financial review or volunteer towards it, but I'm part of a financial review board for anything with an English degree. Like I said, the skills with math and business, you can learn on the job. So I mean, a lot of what you're going to learn in school is going to prepare you for on the job training. You're going to be taught those technical skills, and the more you move up in your career, there becomes a shift at one point where like technical is really important when you're a doer and when you're in those entry level positions. And then as you move up, your technical skills matter less and your communication skills, your presentation skills, all of that matters more. I was able to kind of, by working in business, I learned business, I learned numbers, I learned a lot of financial stuff. Especially the CAT team, we deal with how money is allocated and taxes and everything else. So I had an opportunity to invest in a small business, and I did. They needed some guidance on how they should invest some capital for expansions moving forward. I had become very vocal in some of the meetings, and I've also in writing. So like they'd send something out, and I wouldn't think it was great, and I would write up something very detailed and bulleted and formal, and I would send it to them, and they'd call and ask a bunch of questions. Honestly, the English and writing helped me know how to format and communicate that effectively. So by communicating effectively, things I had questions on, they came back and said, well, we don't even know what you're asking. So can you come talk? And we went and talked, and let's go over numbers. And so they'd be like, we're going to have you come help out with the financial review board. And it wasn't because I went to them and said, hey, I know numbers. It was because I was asking questions and presenting them in ways that they hadn't thought about or that they hadn't been explained in those cases. So again, numbers are important, but the story that is told around the numbers is even more important. So I deal with numbers every day at work, at Allstate as well. And those numbers are important because they can help drive decision making. But the way that story is told, somebody can look at a number and go like, well, that looks like a bad number. But if it's told the correct way, or it's told with the perspective that needs to be seen, then it gives meaning to the number. So the English and communication skills are very important with telling the story of the numbers instead of just presenting numbers.
Thank you. Okay, so if you have a question that you can speak out loud to Josh, you can raise your hand. I think everyone should have the reactions button to be able to raise your hand. You can also type questions in the chat. I know people are in some noisy environments potentially. So you can do that too. All right, so we've got one question here. Once we're done with the conversation, I will discuss with the students who are here how they're going to verify their attendance, because there are some complications with the people signing in as iPhones. All right, so Logan has asked, with the rise of misinformation being more and more common online, do you think that the value of the English degree could be called into question? In the same vein, with the anti-woke policies of the right being introduced, do you think the English major could be in danger, whether of being devalued or being stigmatized? This is an interesting question about kind of how the English major fares in the current political climate.
I will say I have not read anything or any indication. I don't see English as being attacked so much as STEM is maybe being pushed higher. So you'll hear, if you're going to go to school, you're going to spend the money in school, spend the money on English or computer science or finance or accounting. And don't get me wrong, there's those positions are there. But I don't think AI or misinformation is putting English into danger, because English, when you really get back into the what is English, the study of it, you're kind of studying history through a human lens, because you're reading works that go through time and that are considered timeless. You're getting context for a bunch of different periods, and you're learning how to think, and you're learning how to think and view through a lot of different perspectives. So, the rise of misinformation, the only way that you can kind of counteract that is to educate yourself, and to be willing to educate yourself from a lot of different perspectives on the same topic. And I think English is a very good way, very good basis to being able to read something and go, this doesn't make any sense. I don't think that this, whatever topic it is, or whatever the meme says, or whatever the article says, you can look at it critically and go, okay, so here's what they said, but what they didn't talk about were these 4 things. So now I'm going to go look up something about these other 4 things that are on here. It's like, oh, okay, so that story I read appears to have taken 1 sentence out of something out of context. And so now I know that that was, what's the phrase I read in the book recently? It's called, I think, trust me, I'm lying. It was factual, but not truthful. So you can pick a fact and you can say, oh, I'm not lying, this is a fact. But that fact has an entirely different meaning whenever you put it in the context of wherever that fact was pulled from. So I think a lot of misinformation is that. So just having that kind of research mindset and being able to critically think and look at the words that are being used, and why did they pick that word to describe this versus something a little more grounded or finite. So
Yeah, that's a great point about kind of information literacy. So one of the things that my 2101 students did is think about, with the help of Dr. Dusenberry, think about how infographics can mislead people, present truthful data, but present it in such a way that it tells a different story than maybe the most accurate story. And I think that's similar to what you're talking about, being able to assess what you're reading and think about the bigger story around that and what has been kind of skewed potentially.
Yeah, always read and look at the increments on your X and Y. Don't ever trust a bar chart. That's my biggest advice to everybody in here. Look at the X and Y and how far apart those numbers actually are on the scale before you're like, oh, there's no difference here. And you go like, oh, okay, well, they're counting in the millions, or they're counting in the hundreds, and we're talking about differences of thousands, like it. So yeah, the information literacy is very important for that.
Yeah, that's great. I think I see sort of maybe 3 questions that kind of go together about advice for students fresh out of college, or students who are about to be graduating as seniors. And then maybe the internships question might be potentially related to that one. So what kind of advice do you have for students who are about to graduate and thinking about entering the workforce?
Start, if you don't know what field you want to go in, research the different fields. Pick which field exactly you want to go in and start doing some research on that. Start making as many connections as you can. So, I mean, we have a very vast alumni network. Get on LinkedIn and message those people. If you decide you want to go into a certain sector, look for Georgia Southern alumni, and you'd be surprised at how amiable people are to connect with younger people on like LinkedIn or Facebook or any of the other. And I know nobody on here probably uses Facebook anymore. It came out my freshman year of college, but now it's not cool anymore. But reach out anyway on whatever medium you choose and say, hey, how do you like working in whatever it is that you're interested in applying to? And you'll probably get a lot of replies back. So find people find people in the areas that you want to go to, try and reach out to them, just have conversations. It doesn't have to be an interview. It can just sort of be, you've been doing this for this many years. What do you think of it? Is it something people should get into? You can't work on your resume quickly enough. So, use I think is it Graduate Services that still kind of does like resume work at the university for seniors?
It is called the Office of Career and Professional Development now.
Yes, go visit them. Give them whatever work work experience you have, and then your degree and anticipated graduation dates, and have them help you put together your resume and your kind of your portfolio if you're looking at going somewhere that requires a portfolio. set goals, very specific goals. Don't say I want to get a job. Say I want to get a job in this industry. Or I want to have a job in this many months, and kind of hold yourself accountable and keep track of those items. As far as internships, so I mean, like I said, English is a very broad, very broad skill set. Depending on what you want to do, I can't say, you know, because you're an English major, you should do an internship at wherever. Whatever you're interested in, I think an English degree can help put you in there. You know, you may go to corporations, you may decide you want to look into what marketing has to say, or a marketing field may do, because you got to remember they have copyrights that do that too. So with English, you're kind of on a step to becoming a copywriter that could help with advertisements things. So you may want to do an internship at a marketing firm and see if you want to apply yourself there. You may go into insurance or just general business or anything else. So really whatever interests you, just know that you're going to have the soft skills and critical thinking that people are going to want with that. So.
Great.
The
English department is hosting an internships talk next week. I'm trying to find the specific dates for you. There's a couple of questions about teachers here, so maybe those could go together. There's one about how do you feel your professors made getting your English degree enjoyable, and do the professors have anything to do with how you might feel about the English major? And then there's a question about with your background and experience, what is some advice you would give to a future English teacher? And do you still sometimes think about being a teacher?
So on the teacher front, that was once I decided that I was not going to spend the money on law school or anything like that at that point. I went and passed the GACE for history and English, and then looked into being a teacher as well. For me, it just wasn't to go back and do the T4 certification, because I didn't do English education. I did English, you know, BA in English, so education with the specialty in English. So I'd have to go get a teaching degree on top of that. It just wasn't something I was able to commit the time to at that point. My advice with an English teacher, make sure, and this is good, I don't want to say it, I know plenty of teachers, and a lot of them have not read some of the books that they're teaching. So I would make sure you're reading everything your students are going with, because they told me stories of getting called out for having something incorrect on a test. So read the books that you're going to be teaching. Read everything that comes in that's available for you to do. And again, keep working on the soft skills. It's gonna pay dividends with your students, and with parents that you're gonna have to work with, and your peers. So just really communicating effectively with the students, adapting your communication styles for students that may not be getting it. You can write instructions or lesson plans a way that you feel is helping everybody. If you see those couple of kids that just aren't getting it, try and find a different way to communicate the information to them. And then the other question was, let's see.
Do you think your professors made getting your English degree enjoyable?
I do. The professors I had, I mean, they clearly loved what they taught. And so again, those conversations in the classrooms were great for that reason. I can go read a book and I can enjoy it myself, but going and having a really high level intellectual conversation with your professor about a text that you enjoyed, there's just a lot of learning that occurs between those conversations. And that was probably the most enjoyable part, was just like, oh man, I really enjoyed this book. I'd like to go talk to Dr. Brown or Dr. Sear or Dr. Klein about it, and knowing that they love the same thing or the same text you're doing, and you just have a lot of really high level information exchange from that. I mean, they made it enjoyable for that reason. It was good to read something that gave you a different perspective and then discuss that perspective with somebody else who got just as much, if not more, out of it.
Yeah. And that's great for that skill of building empathy that you talked about being so crucial for future leaders as well. Folks, if you're interested in learning more about internships, there's information in the chat about registering for that for next week. think we had a question about learning context through reading classic texts, which maybe builds on what you were just talking about. Do you think that skill will become more valuable in the coming years? Do you think classic texts themselves will evolve?
Well, I think they're called classic for a reason. I don't think they evolve as much. Maybe you can change new stories based off of them, but I mean the Iliad's been around for thousands of years and it's not going to be changed. I think it should still be taught. The context around, and if you could verify for me either in the chat or on here. So when you say, I'm pulling this one here, yeah. Do you think skill? I think so. When you talk about the learning context or classical text, that's critical thinking to me, understanding different perspectives. So yeah, I mean, critical thinking skill is going to continue being valuable. Being able to read a text that's 400 years old and apply a 400-year-old lens to it so that you can have an understanding and perspective that you otherwise wouldn't have. I think that is important. Context is important. Time periods are important. Understanding of social norms from 1650 versus 1950 in different countries and different parts of the world is important. So I think that helps a lot with the empathy and perspective, is reading different texts from different time periods from different parts of the world to get an understanding of how or why those cultures are the way they are. That's very important with classic text and with modern text. And I think the classic texts need, they may evolve, our interpretation of them may evolve, but I don't think they themselves are going to evolve. I think it's important to read them. I think it's important to understand the time period that they came from and not try and add, today's popular opinions to something that's 400 years old and vice versa, or take something out of context that's 400 years old.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And what is classic kind of starts evolving in terms of like, I'm told that 1980 was like 40 years ago, although it doesn't feel like that at this point. And so thinking about, having more of a time period to add more texts that we still understand as products of specific historical and cultural contexts. I think there are a couple of questions here that are related to kind of how you feel about your career path. And I think maybe what the students are getting at is kind of, the journey that you take once you graduate from college and start a career, and how that kind of shifts and changes over time. So let me find the question back. So someone asked, would you pick the same career path or would you make changes? And someone asked how long you've been in your particular field and do you find it challenging at times, or is it something that you love and it doesn't feel like a job?
The number one thing I could say is just get some experience, some professional experience after college as quickly as you can. Maybe a job that you don't immediately love, or you may get into a field that you go, oh, this is great, or you may get into a field and go like, well, this is what I thought I wanted to do and now it's horrible after I've been here for a year and a half. So if you have an idea of what you want to do, try and do that, have a top 3 list and get into one of those and get some experience there. And if it's great, and you see a career path forward, stick with it. If you don't, get out and go and do something else. So getting the job experience is important there. If I could go back and do my career again, so we'll stay, if I'm staying with Allstate and everything, I like what I do. I probably would have left the first role I had, the arbitration office, sooner. I found it easy. So I mean, the communication skills and the writing prowess and all the stuff that and the technical writing training I'd had in college, like that just kind of came in and I did it and it was very quick and I was bored pretty easily. So I probably would have moved into the CAT team a bit sooner if I could go back and do it again. Because I got to meet a lot of people and I got to talk to a lot of people, help a lot of people all over the country. So it was just that experience and knowledge of making those connections, and visiting different parts of the country and getting a lot of different perspectives and cultures, and most importantly, food. Definitely trying all the different foods of all the different places we're at. I do, as far as love my job goes. Love's a strong word, so I do try and keep meanings with words. I try not to use the word love or hate or anything like that too often, because I don't want it to lose its meaning. So I don't love my job because I love very few things in life. Is my kids, my wife. I love them. I do like my job. I do get a lot of fulfillment out of my job. I'm happy with my job. It provides satisfaction and meaning for me. So I don't need to love my job. I need it to give me meaning, and it does that for me.
That's a great perspective. Thank you for sharing that. Does anybody have any final questions for Josh, or Josh, any final advice you want to give these students? I think you've given us lots to think about.
No? Okay, I was pausing for questions for a second. No, I again, just understand the critical thinking. I mean, really, it's important. Problem solving, creativity, perspective, being able to intelligently analyze text and communicate effectively. These are all skills that are needed no matter what business you go into or what career path that you choose. So master those to the best of your ability, make connections, and then just get some job experience as quickly as possible. I don't know what the job market is going to look like when you graduate. I didn't know what it was going to look like whenever I graduated. So I was very fortunate to have a very broad degree at that time when you weren't picking what career you wanted. What was available was picking you, and you were competing with a lot of people. So having a good, strong background with a broad degree was helpful in that regard. Keep an open mind with these things. I'm sure none of you have been like, oh, I want to go work at Allstate and be in their home office one day. Nobody's picking that as a career path, but it's been a rewarding and meaningful career for me on working in catastrophe and then working in design. I get to build things. I get to work with people from all over the world. I have no desire to trade it for anything right now. I really enjoy it. So just don't look at something and go, oh, that doesn't sound exciting, or oh, that doesn't seem like what I want to do. Just give it a shot and try it. And if you hate it in 6 months or a year, you've got work experience now, you've made some money, you've made some connections, and then you can move on to your next thing. So just keep moving forward. Sometimes you'll take a big step, sometimes it'll be a very small step, but as long as you keep moving forward, that's what really matters. As far as anything else goes, if I can help you in any way, or you have questions about a career in insurance, anything like that, feel free to reach out to me. I'm going to post my LinkedIn in the chat. There we go. So that's in there. So you're welcome to add me on LinkedIn or message me or anything like that.
Yeah, thank you so much for being with us tonight and telling us really about, I think, the great ways that you can use skills that you develop in the English major in a variety of ways, and even working for the same company. You've done all kinds of different things involving writing and communication and problem solving that I think is really helpful for our students to hear, that there are a variety of possibilities for them. And of course, we in the English department are here to help you students too with preparing for your future, with helping you outline the skills that you do have and helping you make those connections through internships and different experiences, as well as through bringing our alumni in to talk to you. So we are very grateful that Josh gave us an hour of his evening to talk to us about how far he's gone with his English major. Really appreciate it, Josh. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Conkle. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Again, reach out if you have any questions or just want to chat about any career stuff or anything else I can help you with.
Great, thank you. Students, I saw Professor Joyner said that she recorded her students. I see my students whose names are on here, and I'm going to do a log of all the students that were here. However, if you are on an iPhone that says iPhone, I will not be able to say, obviously, who that was actually on that iPhone. So if you want to type into the chat who you are that corresponds to that iPhone, then I can record your attendance that way. And again, scroll up in the chat for that link to register for next week's event on internships. Thank you for joining us this evening. And enjoy the rest of it. I'm hanging out here just to make sure I get everybody's attendance recorded.